You know, it's very rare that I make a video specifically responding to a single comment on another video. In fact, it's only happened twice. Nephilim Free, Typical Creationist Liar 2 and 8. But recently I had a post on my video, Shock of God on Homosexuality, which was a recording I made in, I think, 2012 of Shock of God saying a bunch of homophobic and really idiotic things in his chat room to me. This person named Joshua Hilt, or he said that he gave 8 very commonly abused reasons why he believes homosexuality is harmful. They're very tired tropes, and I've decided to make a video responding to them.
How? You're born male or female. Gay is not an ethnicity. You have control over your sexual activity, not ethnicity. You've heard of former homosexuals, but not former African Americans.
No. You have control over your sexual actions, not your sexual preferences. The scientific consensus is that sexual orientation is genetic. They cannot stop being gay any more than straight people can stop being heterosexual. If you really believe you can change your sexual orientation, then you might not be as straight as you think you are. Not that there is anything wrong with being bisexual. And there are no such thing as former homosexuals. There are poor people who have been forced to endure a torturous prison in which they are brainwashed into thinking they are terrible people, rejected by their family and community. Eventually they are trained to lie to themselves and their family. But they will always be the way they are. It would be just as traumatic and ineffective to force a heterosexual person to the opposite treatment.
The statement, "you're a bigot," is self-defeating. Isn't that bigotry? Even if you're right, why are you bigoting against me for being a bigot? Now, I'm not using bigotry right now. I'm giving you justification for why I believe same-sex marriage is not a good idea.
First off, there's no such word as bigoting, because bigot is a noun, not a verb. And calling you a bigot is not bigotry. A bigot is someone who discriminates against someone with different group characteristics based on ignorance or preconceived bias. Objecting to someone like you, who expresses antisocial behavior, such as attempting to inhibit a group of people from living their lives and telling them that they are broken, evil, or degenerate, is not bigotry.
Yes, but some animals eat their young. Should I do that too? Why are you getting morality from animals?
Sigh, appeal to consequences, appeal to emotion. We do not get our morality from animals, but mammalian behavior and psychology give us insight into our own species. Socialization experiments with other apes, monkeys, and mice have given us a greater understanding of the effects of social isolation on an individual, for example.
Too late. Every law discriminates. The law that bans murder. That law discriminates against the act of murder, not the person who commits the crime. All laws discriminate against acts, but not the person.
You don't know what discrimination means, just like you don't know what bigotry means. Discrimination is an action performed on a group of people, not a specific act. And really, do I need to spell this out for you? Murder is not an act that is usually performed by consenting adults. That's more of that antisocial behavior I mentioned earlier. Lastly, the Constitution does not contain laws except for treason. Laws are created by the legislative branch.
Gay is not a race or ethnicity. African Americans, Caucasian, Asian, etc. are. Sexual actions and race are not the same thing. You all control over your sexual actions. You have no control over what race you are.
Again, you have control over your sexual actions, not your sexual preferences. Trying to make it illegal to be homosexual is exactly as ineffective and discriminatory as making it illegal to be born African American.
There is medical evidence that homosexual, mostly homosexual men, intercourse is actually dangerous and more likely to give a disease than heterosexual sex. What's loving about doing something that is not medically safe? Of a man knows the dangers of having homosexual sex with a man, but does it anyways. How is that loving?
Oh God, it's the argument from anal sex fallacy. You have memorized the Family Research Council's playbook. How hard is this to understand? This argument is based on two false assumptions: that all homosexual men engage in anal sex, and that anal sex is an act exclusive to homosexual men.
You're being biased. What about the homosexual couples that are abusive? Why are you only talking about straight couples when it comes to abuse?
Who says I or anyone are only talking about straight couples? No one who is taken seriously believes that homosexuals do not have the capacity to be abusive or otherwise ineffective parents.
Wrong. Mother and father play a vital role in raising children. I have a link that has 3 paragraphs about why children need a mother and a father.
And now, we have come to Josh's only source for his information. Before I get into it, just because a family has 2 fathers or 2 mothers does not mean that they can't have other close maternal or paternal influences, respectively. This source is from the Family Research Council. That is an organization classified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-homosexual hate group. They have made claims such as homosexual conduct is harmful to the persons who engage in it and to society at large and can never be affirmed. They describe it as unnatural and as such is associated with negative physical, psychological health effects. They falsely assert that there is no convincing evidence that homosexual identity is ever something genetic or inborn. That is a lie, and I can prove it. Their article has 10 arguments as follows. This first, quote, science-based argument is basically stating that kids of lesbian couples are curious about their sperm donors. Well, shocker here, adopted kids are also often curious about their biological parents. Does this mean that all adoption should be made illegal? That kids would be better off with no parents rather than adopted parents? Of course they wouldn't say that, because heterosexual adoption doesn't offend them, so they are happy to ignore the data that doesn't support their beliefs. And the sources for this argument are not even studies about homosexual couples. They are books on single mother households and divorce. Apparently, lesbian couples would have daughters that are more likely to become teen mothers and sons who are more likely to be antisocial. Again, the sources for this have nothing to do with lesbian couples. They describe children who live with single mothers and whose fathers don't interact with them, which makes them irrelevant, and therefore this claim has no merit. Obviously, this is implying that male couples will be unable to properly raise kids without a maternal influence. Their sources are not studies on homosexual couples and their impact on the children they raise. Noticing a pattern here? They are books on gender roles and the effect that they have on developing children. Again, since their sources have nothing to support their claim, there is no reason to take it seriously. Aha! Finally, a study that is actually regarding same-sex parents. The study is mainly an analysis of how other studies of homosexual parents might be inaccurate. The point is moot, because this is a 2001 study. There have been much better studies since this one. More on that later. This section has a single source, and it actually is a study on the sexual orientation of parents and how it affects their children. I took a look at it and was shocked by the irony. This study actually condemns the biased work of psychologists with presupposed homophobic beliefs. Psychologists who have shifted the burden of proof to the same-sex couples to prove that they aren't inferior parents. Others have relied on the long-discredited work of Paul Cameron, a man who cherry-picked homosexuals out of obituaries and concluded that gay people die much sooner. Family Research Council, why would you try to support your views using a source that completely debunks your beliefs? Yup, same-sex marriage will make people cheat more. Their claim that only 50% of gay men in civil unions valued sexual fidelity is based on a book from 1984. This was written during a time when homosexual relationships were much less accepted. This made it harder for gay couples to maintain stable and healthy relationships. Newer studies have shown an increase in long-term monogamous relationships with same-sex couples as it has become more accepted by society. Do I even need to read a source on national fertility rates? Their point is that countries with legalized same-sex marriage have lower birth rates. Neither of these sources actually link acceptance of same-sex marriage with decreased birth rates. And why the hell would they? Why would other people getting married decrease the desire of heterosexual couples to procreate? The decreasing birth rates in Western countries is much more correlated with the increasing emphasis on education and careers, especially in women, which causes couples to start families later and have fewer children. At any rate, the idea that same-sex marriage would diminish heterosexual couples from having kids is just really stupid, and they provide no evidence to support it. And saying that the purpose of marriage is procreation, no, it's security and companionship. Lots of people have decided far in advance that they never want kids. My family is a good example. My dad has 2 sisters. Both have kids. I have 4 cousins. My mom has 1 sister. She never wanted any kids, as long as she could remember, and she never had any, so no cousins. Well, step-cousins. And some step-second cousins once removed. And a couple of step-third cousins twice removed. Oh boy. This section describes the growing trend of divorce and children born out of wedlock. Their sources tie these trends to the increase in available abortions and contraceptives. This time, I can only read the abstract of the study and a stub of a book. But it does not matter, because this is an entirely different debate. The Family Research Council tries to relate this to same-sex marriage, stating, quote, "It is plausible to suspect that legal recognition of homosexual civil marriage would have similar consequences to the institution of marriage." But of course, they provide no evidence for it, because there isn't any. Yep, that's right. Get back in the kitchen, honey. Look, I understand that we are a sexually dimorphic species, and there are plenty of reasons never to expect a total 50-50 participation rate in every field by both genders. And although their sources are books that I can only read descriptions, this is all these books seem to be claiming. Taking sex differences seriously does not claim that we need to take the family unit back to the 1950s, but seems to be arguing that the differences between men and women are not all socially constructed. The other source, for better or for worse, also does not talk about same-sex relationships. It discusses divorce and why it's not always a bad thing. Their final topic describes the benefits of marriage to men. In part, this is true. Men tend to be more promiscuous. To this end, men tend to have more sexual partners than women. But as I have mentioned earlier, as same-sex relationships have become more socially accepted, long-term monogamous relationships have increased. Not only that, studies that claim to show the opposite have proven to have been skewed by the bias of the researcher and or improper sampling. Check the information bar. What is there evidence that a committed relationship and having children won't cause similar psychological effects on men? They have none. They assume it won't based on bad statistics and an obsolete book that is older than I am. Even if their conclusions were not based on bad data, what would be the point? These men would still be homosexual and will never want to marry women. So, no, Josh, I reject your source wholeheartedly. I will continue to reject any article presented by the Family Research Council. They have proven to lie and misrepresent sources to further their own bigoted beliefs. I reject all of your statements as baseless and bigoted. I have much better scientific sources that refute everything you say. Please, check the information bar. An Australian study of hundreds of same-sex families found that their children's psychological, educational, and physical health were actually about 6% higher on average than their counterparts with heterosexual parents. An American study showed that daughters of lesbian parents are more likely to seek non-gender specific career paths, and the sons of lesbian parents have almost no decrease in masculine traits, except for a slight decrease in aggressive antisocial behavior. Again, check the links. The sad thing is, you probably will not listen to anything I have said. You, like creationists and other religious extremists, have already decided in advance to reject anything that disagrees with your predetermined beliefs. But prove me wrong. Did this refutation have any effect on your opinions? Are you going to stop assuming conclusions based on religiously motivated bias?